Okay, so it is 5 o'clock, so I will get this meeting going. So welcome to the February 10th Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting. Just as a reminder, this meeting is being held entirely remotely. So all participants are participating via Zoom app. If you are on the call, please make sure to mute your phone or your device when you're not speaking so that you're not picked up by the recording. Also be careful not to screen share your computer, as anything you might screen share may be captured by the recording. I also want to just remind everybody to please raise your hand either virtually or into your camera to be recognized by me in order to speak. We are going to be without Jeff Carlson, at least for the beginning of this meeting, but he's hopefully going to hop on once he's out of his FinCom obligation. So tonight we will begin our meeting with public comment on items not being heard on the agenda. So does anybody have public comment this evening? RJ?
Thank you, Chair Erisman. RJ for the Nantucket Land Council, just requesting an update on the quarterly reports and sand delivery tickets for 2021 for the Sconset Bluff project. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. I know we've had a few questions come through the commission and staff about that. So when Jeff hops on, maybe he can give an update during staff reports at the end of the meeting. Any other public comment this evening? Sam?
Great. Thank you, Chair Erisman and fellow commissioners. Sam Keverstan of Mass Audubon. I'm speaking tonight to see if there's any update regarding the unauthorized construction on Mass Audubon property along Pulpus Road. And what, if any, actions have been taken thus far to determine damage and restore our Sacaja Heathlands Wildlife Sanctuary and associated wetlands, as outlined in our November 19th, 2020 and February 24th, 2021 letters. We had requested an update on July 27th, and we haven't yet received word on the situation. And I was in the area today following Winter Storm Keenan, and I've observed worsening erosion on either side of the structure. It appears now that supports for the guardrail on Pulpus Road are now exposed and they're no longer covered by soil or other material, as well as some of those perpendicular Jersey barriers supports are now crooked. They're kind of leaning. It also seems that the worsening erosion it's not only impacting Mass Audubon property, but also town of Nantucket property. So with that, we look forward to receiving a complete written update from the town in the near future, and looking forward to hearing what information there is to share at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate you asking these questions. And we will hopefully, again, ask Jeff what progress is being made and hopefully get a thorough update tonight from him on where progress stands. And if progress is not being made, we'll see to it that there is progress.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Ian, I thought I saw your hand up.
You did, Ashley. Thank you. On my screen, there's a gentleman who is only identified as iPad, and I was wondering who it was. That's the one.
My name is Rich St. Pierre. I live on Pacamo Road, and
Great.
I'm here. Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Ashley.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, let me just make sure to check YouTube. I don't think we have public comment there. No.
Did I have to take that picture off?
Oh, your picture's on. It's just labeled as iPad, I think.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I don't know if it should be on or off.
nope, you're good. You just want to mute yourself when you're not talking.
Right, yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so tonight the following items are continued under notices of intent. We have Lower Pocomo Nominee Trust at 88 Pocomo Road, continued until February 24th. We have Pocomo Point Realty Trust at 90 Pocomo Road, continued until February 24th. We also have the Linda Loring Nature Foundation at 90, 110, 124, 130, and 136 Eel Point Road. That's continuing until February 24th. Under amended orders of conditions, we have Phillips Trustee at 19 East Tristram's Avenue, continuing until February 24th. And I believe that is all of our continuances. So we will begin tonight's meeting with Tsunami Realty Trust at 283 Hammock Pond Road, represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. For the record, Brian Madden from LEC Environmental. Would you like me to share my screen, actually?
Sure, because I don't have access to the files. That would be great, Brian.
Okay, I'll just pull up the plan again. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So this is our second meeting. Just to reiterate, this is relocating the existing dwelling on 283 Hammock Pond Road to maximize the setback from the eroding shoreline coastal bank to the south. The relocated footprint here is located greater than 100 feet away from the top of the coastal bank and essentially up against the 50-foot buffer setback to BVW associated with Hammock Pond. So maximizing that retreat as far back as the property and buffers allow. The proposed driveway is going to be rerouted here to also maximize the setback. We had continued the last meeting waiting for natural heritage letter determination, which came in today, and they confirmed the no take and the no adverse effect to the actual resource area habitat estate listed rare wildlife. They did make a recommendation that we are actually proposing, but just to put on the record, and I think it would be good to condition as such, was they had recommended that the proposed driveway layout and dwelling area to be abandoned. We should utilize the existing soil material from the proposed new driveway and house footprint, basically restoring this area and then the existing traveled way, which we'd be happy to do. And I think that makes a ton of sense to keep the seed bank and the native material in place and restore as is. So basically, that was it. And I'll turn it over to questions. Do you want me to stop this share?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you, Brian.
All right, thanks.
All right, so we'll open it up to commissioners' comments and questions. Are there any comments or questions from commissioners? Looks like no, so we'll open it up to the public. No public comment at this point. Brian, I just have one question, and it doesn't have to do with your property, but the one just beyond that accesses kind of through this property. When you change the driveway, will they still be able to get like that house out of there?
Well, the existing easement is now on the beach, so that is a good question.
Okay.
I don't have an answer to it.
Okay. Yeah, I figured I would ask. So I did speak to Jeff before the meeting, and we do have everything we would need to close this one. So Brian, would you like to close?
Please.
Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Ian, seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Brian.
Bye.
Bye. All right, so that moves us on to the town of Nantucket at Sacaja Pond, and this is represented by Thais Fournier.
Hi, thank you, Ashley. So I just want to give a quick synopsis, if I may, Chair, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sure you've all had time to read the proposal and perhaps the letters that were submitted, including the letter that I submitted on the 9th. This is just to mitigate widgeon grass that has been growing to excessive levels in and around Sacaja Pond. In particular, we're looking to place what I would like to call non-aggressive form of mitigating these plants. It's not a permanent solution. You can remove these pond mats. They're just mats that are placed along the bottom, covering the plants. And then because it's blocking out light, the plants will then die. This is to improve a swimming area. It's now become an issue of human safety, as many people and small children do recreate in and around the pond. Myself, I have had difficulty going out to collect water quality samples with boats. It's been tangled in the prop, same with kayaking, any kind of outreach experience that I have tried to do. In addition, because the widgeon grass is now reaching the surface where you can visually see the grass, we've also had issues with algal mats congregating in the widgeon grass, which is mixed with some of our harmful algal bloom species that we have seen throughout the past couple of years. Again, this is now an issue for aquatic and human life, especially with people swimming in and around that water, because those species are capable of producing toxins, which can be fatal. So I wanted to propose a small area in the whole scheme of the pond. It is about 0.02% of the total area. The pond is 266 acres and widgeon grass grows about, I want to say half surrounding the pond when I have been out and just visually looking at it. So it's a very small area. And I think the benefits really outweigh the costs because it is to help, it's a swimmer safety concern now. Also, it's a water quality issue because this grass does it dies. And when you're getting a lot of organic matter that is decaying, it's removing oxygen out of the water. And we've been getting low oxygen zones. Again, I have not done any necropsies on the deceased birds or fish that we have seen, but especially over the summer, we have seen a lot of fish kills and a lot of dead waterfowl along the shores. And sometimes that's indicative of either ingesting harmful algae or really low dissolved oxygen, specifically for the fish kills. So again, I didn't perform any necropsies on them, but it's becoming an issue that is, it's getting excessive and we need to mitigate something or else we will just, like most ponds, let them naturally eutrophy and fill in. So that is a possibility, but I'm trying to mitigate that before that happens. We also are doing a larger watershed management plan of mitigating nutrients that are going into the pond, but because it has kind of gotten a little out of hand, we need to implement strategies in pond in addition to doing watershed management. So if anyone has any questions specifically, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Thais. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Mark?
Yes, through you, Ashley. It seemed like a very modest start for a very large pond. Is there a reason you're just starting with a very, very small area for a big problem?
Sure. My approach is a very green approach. As the water resource specialist for the Natural Resources Department, I'd like to try less aggressive approaches besides going, for instance, widgeon grass has been managed up and down the East Coast. I just spoke with two gentlemen from Solitude that explained that they use chemical treatment for widgeon grass in Newport, Rhode Island and Little Compton, Rhode Island. And so I wanted to try a small project that was less aggressive, that was ecologically friendly, to provide a safe swimming area for the public of Nantucket, in addition to improving water quality. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Ian?
Thank you, Ashley. So Thais, have you had a chance to read Commissioner Seth Engelborg's letter?
Yes, I have.
Well, there we go. That's called a leading question.
I did. I don't know, Ian, if you've also had a chance. I did respond. I tried to address a lot of the concerns that were made by the commission in my response letter. So if there's anything in particular I could elaborate on, I am aware of the many beneficial reasons to keep widgeon grass. Again, I'm highlighting that it is 0.02% of the entire pond, in light of bigger benefits that I personally feel in regards to swimmer safety, harmful algal blooms, etc. And I think I mentioned this too in my letter. Sometimes it's difficult for natural resource managers to kind of find the balance between whether we need to manage something and also provide recreational opportunities for the public to enjoy. And again, every action has a reaction with anything. Just like when we create boat ramps for people to access our ponds, or creating nature trails that disturb native vegetation and the organisms that are around the areas, but they are still created to provide outreach and education for the public.
Does that answer your question, Ian?
Well, I just wanted to put it out there so the public would be aware of it. And I don't have any expertise on the subject, so thank you, Thais.
Yeah, I know, Thais, I had a question, and Maureen, I see your hand up, so I'll go to you next. I totally understand toxins from harmful algae blooms and, the algae getting stuck in the widgeon grass and allowing kind of an algal mat to form. But when we're talking about fish kills, I would think removing the widgeon grass might actually add to fish kills, because the widgeon grass being submerged aquatic vegetation, it would actually be releasing oxygen into the water column. So you lose that benefit by removal. I realize this is a small area, but I was just wondering how you would kind of quantify those things.
Sure, you brought up a great point. This is what makes ecology rather difficult, because there's so many affecting parameters that are interconnected, which there's never really a clear answer to doing anything. So that is correct, that it does provide oxygen into the water. However, when you're getting very dense amounts of any kind of submerged aquatic plant, sometimes it might be an issue for, let's say, predatory fish and actually finding and feeding, because it's such a thick area. Same with waterfowl as well. Like, they feed on widgeon grass, but it's not productive for them in a really thick, dense area because they cannot wade. In addition, I wanted to make a point here, excuse me for my notes, but a lot of times plants can act as pumps. So they do take up nutrients, but then they can release it into the water column. And also, so while they're alive, and then ultimately when some plants die and you see a large amount of widgeon grass. Even the other day, I was out probably in January, just seeing it all along the shoreline, and in the water, it dies. And then because of that decay, it's pulling out oxygen out of the water. So it is the cycle of ecology, but when it gets to a point, because there's so much, and that is indicative of having excess nutrients into the pond, which we are currently trying to manage. We've been trying to manage our watershed just with mitigations to fertilizer, encouraging individuals to upgrade their septic systems if they can connect to sewer, as well as we are proposing to install a rain garden. I think I said that earlier, in the area to help mitigate the nutrients from the runoff that's coming into the pond.
Thank you. Maureen, I saw your hand up, and then Seth, I'll go to you.
Actually, I will defer to Seth. So
Seth, we'll go to you, and then Maureen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I made most of my comments clear in the submission, but I have a few additional things that I think are relevant here. And I totally take Thais's point, and I understand that the town is trying to effectively manage water quality in this area. But there's a few things at play here that make this a complex situation. First, I think the equivalency between something like this and creating a nature trail have been made. I don't see that as being equivalent whatsoever. This is an entirely in resource area impact, whereas something like a nature trail or even a boat ramp would generally be a buffer zone project. And in creating those projects, most land managers attempt to actually avoid resource areas where they are able to. Second, the idea of recreation is being brought to the fold here as one of the things that we are tasked to protect. And that is true. It is one of the protected interests in the Wetlands Protection Act and in the local regulations. But recreation is a broad topic, and recreation in this sense is only being referred to as swimming and boating. Recreation, if as defined in the Wetlands Protection Act and our local regulations, encompasses a variety of things, including swimming, boating, fishing, shell fishing, hunting, and wildlife observation. If you think about all of those in summation, two of them may possibly be improved by this project, and the other four are going to be, I don't know what the right word is here, but they're going to be affected adversely by doing this. Wildlife observation is definitely going to be affected adversely. You're going to have a significant decrease in the water birds using that area. This is one of the most productive water bird locations on island. You're also going to have, impacts to the fishing and shell fishing. I guess shell fishing is closed there, but this serves as a nursery area for shellfish and for fish species. So there's going to be impacts there. So I think we need to look holistically about recreation and think about, okay, recreation is a protected interest, but it's as a whole, not just for a specific subset. And then lastly, I think that there are several reasonable alternatives to this project. If you look at the area where the benthic barriers, the pond mats are proposed, it happens to be right in front of the beach access, which is traditionally where people keep their boats and kayaks and things like that. But the shoreline at Quidnet is relatively large. There's the opportunity to just take those boats and bring those uses to the south or north at that site where the widgeon grass isn't occurring in such a dense stand. And I think that what we should be doing is encouraging native vegetation for all the reasons I've talked about so far and all the benefits it provides. I understand that we're trying to strike the balance as managers, but I think that the real issue here is that there's clearly a water quality issue in Sacaja that the town is taking beneficial steps to look into and deal with. But if anything, I would like to see this proposal be encompassed in a larger watershed management proposal. This, granted, even in the application, is referenced as a short-term solution. It's not something that's going to change the aquatic health necessarily in this pond. But if that's it, I don't see the need for doing it at all. I think we are trying to gain such a small benefit and for such a small limited use in an area that happens to be highly used for summer recreation. And I think that doing this project significantly, the benefits or the cost of this project significantly outweigh the benefits when you take into account the impacts to native vegetation and native species.
Thank you, Seth.
Chair, may I respond?
Yes, go ahead.
Seth, thank you for all those points. You do have valid points. I will, you had a number of them there, so hopefully I can address all of them. I did want to just note when I was trying to, perhaps that wasn't, if I was coming off equating them being the same things with nature trails and what we're trying to do here at Sacaja Pond. The point I was trying to make is that sometimes in light of a bigger picture here, it ends up sometimes affecting other things. So that's the only point I was trying to make. Again, this is a small area. I actually think the benefits really do outweigh the cost for this, in my opinion. I have concern for as this continues on. And again, we are doing management strategies to reduce nutrients into the pond. However, just like other practices that have been done on island, and this is not even a chemical treatment, but there are some water bodies that are so far gone that you have to start doing in pond management. And there has been chemical treatments that have been placed in our water bodies to mitigate harmful algal blooms. And it's something that we try to avoid. We're trying to do both things, but sometimes it just gets to a point that we need to start doing pond management. Sacaja Pond is a very diverse habitat. There are a lot of waterfowl. I think by reducing the proposed area, that small percentage is not going to significantly decrease the waterfowl. If anything, I've seen more dead waterfowl in Sacaja over my time here, and just with talking with individuals that have been here in the Quinnet Squam Association that have been there for many years. They have significantly seen the decline with dead fish, the grass just on the shore, dead waterfowl. And so yes, water quality is a huge issue. Again, this is a small, less aggressive approach just to improve water quality in that area, because it will, and as well as also provide a safe swimming area for children and adults. I guess the only other alternative that I see if we don't do this, because it does, there are a lot of lag effects in ecology. And as we're still continuing to do our watershed management for reducing nutrients into the pond, that's going to take some quite time to see some impact. And a lot of our nutrient input too is atmospheric, and that's something that we can't control. But the other alternative will just have the pond naturally grow in, which is an option as well. So it just comes down to kind of both of those options.
So,
Thank you, Thais and Seth. I want to make sure Maureen gets her question out. And then Seth, I saw your hand go back up, and I saw you as well, Ian.
Thanks, Madam Chair. As someone who is not technically trained on any of these issues, in reading the application and Seth's response and all the responses from people who live and have used the pond over time, I was trying to get a handle on that the widgeon grass, which is apparently a good thing in many areas, or by itself is a good thing. Is it too successful in this place because of what we have done, with adding more nutrients, via fertilizer and septic systems? Obviously atmospheric counts, but we can't do anything about that directly. So is this something that we have to manage, differently as as time goes on? Or is there an amount of widgeon grass that you could get to in this pond that would be beneficial for water quality and not have the, too much of the bad effects that Seth was talking about, and you mentioned too, also Ashley. So it's I was thinking about that, and I know this isn't like Phragmites, which I'm much more familiar with, but the trying to balance everything there, I think is really tough, and the historic use of this pond for recreation is very long and broad. I mean, it's a really important resource for people, and I give a lot of weight to that. And I guess I do have a question maybe for Thais, is that this is going to be a pilot project. If it were decided that a more significant process was going to be taken in order to, like, what would be the ultimate goal? If you could, would you want to get rid of all the widgeon grass? Would you try and just remove it from certain places, given what is happening at different places along the shoreline to the pond? Does it matter at all that this is not a pond that is regularly getting flushed through from the ocean? Does that, are there other ways to handle this? So I see this as extremely complicated, but the loss of this as a recreational area, and I give a lot of weight to that. And I know the widgeon grass is important, but is it, has it become over successful? So those are the things I'm thinking about. But how much more would have to be done, Thais, to get this down to where its impact would be, significantly lessened as opposed to this small pilot?
My plan would not be to remove all of the widgeon grass. It has become an issue probably since 2017, 2018. And I came on in 2019, and this is just from people who have been here in the past that have, photographed and discussed this with myself. If it had stayed, a lot into the pond, it's usually widgeon grass isn't an issue because it's submerged and it's usually in deeper water. And so it's not impacting recreational activities or causing any kind of swimmer safety issues because it's so submerged. But because it has increased, and again, it's a plant, and when you add nutrients to any plants, they grow. So there's a combination of things going on in Sacaja, just like the rest of our ponds. Like, this is not the first pond to have nuisance vegetation. And in my letter, I did note that in 2015, 23,000 pounds of native vegetation was approved by the commission to be removed from Hammock Pond. And that was also for water quality and recreational activities. And there was a number of species, including widgeon grass. So for my intention was to, again, I know Seth indicated that it's such a short term that it's the costs outweigh the benefits, but I look at it as a small area that we wanted to try to see if we could mitigate and improve some of the water quality and the recreational activities, specifically in Sacaja Beach. And I apologize for having the misleading photo, but these mats are submerged. You won't see them. You will feel them. It's a kind of like a matte texture feel, nothing uncomfortable. There's non-viable shellfish there to begin with in Sacaja because it's substrate limited and they don't grow to size. And it's also closed because of elevated fecal bacteria due to the increase of waterfall. So I'm not worried about significantly decreasing our waterfowl population. We've had such an increase of them. But yeah, my hope was just to put in that area to see. I do test the water June through September. I would test the water beforehand and afterwards. So we're monitoring it in addition to our other management strategies that we're doing already to reduce, like I said, the nutrients into the pond. Yeah, I felt that it was a really light approach to improving what I thought was quite a large problem, because now it's just seeming to increase. And I'm sure all of you have seen when you drive by Sacaja, or if you haven't, check it out this summer. But yeah, you can see the widgeon grass and all of the algal mats that are congregating, and then the midges and everything else that comes with decaying organic matter in the pond. So Maureen, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I just wanted to try out an area to see. And I think it would only honestly be negatively impacting the widgeon grass for that small area. I don't think it would be killing a large fish population or killing the already non-existent shellfish.
Thank you, Thais. Seth, I saw your hand back up, and then Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And Thais, I hear what you're saying in terms of water quality. I'll defer to you as the specialist here on island, but I do wonder, in your submission, you said that, there's anecdotal evidence that the algal blooms are kind of like being localized in that area. I've been on that site. I've seen dead fish, dead birds, but I'm just wondering, like, is it possible to, before we go and do this, go out and collect some more data, do some better monitoring, try to see if the widgeon grass is really the cause of what you're talking about here, or if there's a kind of, if it's like a secondary effect. In my opinion, I'm not a water quality specialist, but I see widgeon grass as a beneficial native species that is productive to creating oxygen, to providing substrate, to providing food and nursery for wildlife. And I think that it's sort of being blamed here for a larger process that's creating water quality issues. And I think that, it may be time intensive and effort intensive to go out and see, but I would like to see that data collected. And if we can draw a correlation actually between the widgeon grass and decreased water quality, then I would entertain this notice of intent. But right now, what I see is that we have an ongoing problem with probably a much more extensive and expensive solution needed. And doing this right now, I'm not sure it's actually going to cause the effect that you want. The whole purpose of this, I agree, very limited project is to create a safe, swimmable area that's better for recreation. But is this going to do that? I'm not sure. I think, well, yeah, maybe it will. I'm sure it will be able to reduce the population of widgeon grass. But is it going to create better water quality in that area? Is it going to solve any of the other problems in the pond? I personally don't think so. And if you already have a eutrophic pond with decreased water quality conditions, this to me is like a Band-Aid that's not solving the problem. And it's going to cause, it's going to look better maybe on the surface, but it's not going to do anything to create a better swimmable area there.
Sure. Great point, Seth. I will refer back to what I've been saying before. There comes a point where even a beneficial species such as widgeon grass can become excessive, and it can become detrimental to habitat for predatory fish foraging, to waterfowl foraging, to swimmer safety concern, to having condensed algal mats that have harmful algal blooms. I'm not blaming widgeon grass. I apologize if I was coming across as blaming widgeon grass. It is just the growth of widgeon grass is a result of a larger problem. You're absolutely correct. I've said that before. We have, I don't really know how much more intensive monitoring that we can do. The town of Nantucket does in-depth testing where we do it from June through September, which is the prime time of poor water quality, where we test and collect our samples. Once a month, we ship them out and they do a slew of tests regarding nutrients, basic water quality parameters, et cetera. And we do that because it informs our management decisions of the poor water quality. If I go out and test now, in the wintertime, parameters aren't going to show what's actually really happening. The water quality tends to be better in the winter based on water chemistry and a bunch of other different factors. We are in the process of mitigating the larger problem, which is in part a lot of human impact. And so as humans who enjoy the natural resources, like we all live here, we try to find a good medium between residing in Mother Earth because we share this environment. And I am a huge proponent of protecting natural resources. I wouldn't be doing this job if I wasn't. And so that's why I was trying to really find a less aggressive, non-chemical approach to this. So to be frank, I'm actually quite surprised that this has had such significant pushback. I do understand, again, it's not the widgeon grass fault. We just have to start now looking at some in-pond management, just like we do with our ponds that have severe harmful algal blooms, like they're green. We do chemical treatments for them. That's not addressing the larger issue. Like it makes it look good for now, but we're still pumping in, fertilizer and runoff and wastewater effluent and pollution and water chemical contaminants that are being mobilized after rain that are coming all into our water bodies. So we're trying to find a combination of managing what we're doing as well as addressing the issue that is now becoming a problem now. Because the other alternative, we could do more testing and studying, but we're already doing that now. And then the only other alternative I see is just to let the pond naturally eutrophy, which ponds do over time. It's a natural process, they fill in. It's just exacerbated by human impact. And so we try to, again, manage that resource as best as we can with minimal environmental impacts.
Thank you. Ian, I know you had your hand up.
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Thais, I'm not sure how much pushback you're getting from the rest of the commission, apart from Seth's observations. And mine's more of a fact-finding and curiosity approach, because I don't have any specialist knowledge, unlike you and Seth. I'm curious as to, is there widgeon grass throughout the pond? And off the top of your head, how would you quantify the ratio of widgeon grass to harmful algae?
Oh, great question, Ian. That's really hard to document because harmful algal blooms happen from time to time, and it's usually when they're visually spotted because sometimes they can dissipate. So normally, the good thing about harmful algal blooms sometimes is they end up around like the shoreline, but sometimes they can be dissipated with wind. But what makes it difficult with the widgeon grass is that it's tending to mix in with the algal mats that are growing over the widgeon grass. And so it's congregating an area and they can't dissipate. I would say that, I want to say 50% of that pond is covered in widgeon grass, if not more. A lot of it is submerged into the pond. That's not an issue. It's just, I want to say like a quarter into the pond on either the Pulpus side or the Sacaja Beach side, you're just wading through and kayaking and boating through grass. I don't know the ratio of the toxic algae in comparison to widgeon grass, but I do have documented events that happened over the summer that I could also provide the commission with.
Well, thank you, because I'm getting the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's really a lot of widgeon grass. And so this is really we're dealing with a very small percentage here of the overall widgeon grass in the pond. And so to address Seth's concern in terms of oxygenation, and as that is really, we're dealing with a relatively small amount by mass of widgeon grass in the overall pond. So my feeling is that I think we should try your approach here. I'm not a fan of trying a chemical approach if that can be avoided, and I'm sure Seth isn't either. So, well, I won't speak for you, Seth, on this, but so thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian. So I do want to make sure we open this up to the public, but Thais, another question just came to my mind. So you guys are putting those mats out there. Are you going to put like a swimming rope in the pond, like that's at Children's Beach, to kind of differentiate for people, like this is our swimming area? Or is it, just kind of freely going to be open?
No, I mean, my idea was to have maybe not a rope, but just a buoy from like either side. And then we'd have to obviously educate people on what that buoy is indicating. It's sometimes when they're dragging boats out, you could rip the mats or pull up the mats. They're weighted with rebar on the bottom, and they're quite heavy, and they just lay there. And you can take them out over the summer. You can keep them year round. They've had mats last up to 20 years that have stayed in swimming areas or around docks or other areas. So I would put something so that people are aware, just so they're not ripping or disturbing the mat.
Right. And then my other question, you mentioned a rain garden component to this. I somehow missed that in the application. So I was wondering if you could just describe like where that's going to be and how it'll act as mitigation.
I apologize. I misspoke. This is a separate project that is in the works of proposal with the Quinet-Squam Association members to install a bioswale, which functionally serves as a rain garden. So a vegetated area leading down into the pond that will help mitigate and filter nutrients and sediment runoff first, and then the water will trickle down into the pond. So I just wanted to highlight that we were also doing other management strategies to solve the bigger issue. But because we have an issue at hand, we're trying to manage that as well, just like the rest of, of people trying to do in-pond management.
Yes, thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Sorry I was late. I was stuck in FinCom and got out as fast as I could because I'd much rather be here. But just to touch on that, that's a project that I'm a little bit more involved in, and Thais has been working on the rain garden. One of the things that our office has been working with, primarily with the Land Bank and the Quinet-Squam Association, is anyone that's used that access that goes from Sacaja Road to the pond, kind of that old historic rutted dirt way. Especially during rain events, there's quite a bit of runoff that comes down the road and then runs through that area, and trying to minimize the amount of surface water runoff that goes, uncollected or untreated from the roadway into there. So we've been looking at ways to capture that from the roadway and find somewhere else to put it, whether it's on, there's a piece of town property on the north side of the road that we could, try to naturally infiltrate it, or on the south side of the road, on the beach side there. But I think what it's speaking to in kind of the bigger conversation the town has been having in that area, especially with the Quinet-Squam folks specifically, is how do we start to reduce the number of, sources that get into the pond? How do we better control roadway runoff? How do we better control, landscaping runoff? And it's something that the Homeowners Association there's been very active in, especially in the last 12 to 24 months, and the Land Bank has really been interested in as well. So I know it's not part of the active application that's there, but it is things that we're looking at as far as trying to do those. I just wanted to provide a little bit more info on what that project was, or what that project is kind of looking at.
Thank you, Jeff. So are there any final comments and questions from commissioners before we open it up to the public? Seth?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say, I know we can't tie permitting decisions to proposed future projects, but I do appreciate that the town has those other projects in the pipeline. I think that's, in my opinion, probably more relevant to the dealing with the issues at hand. But I've said my piece about this specific management approach, but it's good to hear that there are some of the other things that I've requested in the pipeline already.
Thank you, Seth. So at this point, we'll open it up for public comment on this issue. Karen Beatty.
Yes, thank you. This is Karen Beatty with the Nantucket Conservation Foundation, and I just wanted to weigh in on some of the experiences we've had in our pond management projects regarding widgeon grass. Kind of the opposite end of the spectrum at Pest House Pond, which is a really tiny pond where we're doing permitted in-pond management. I'm really curious about the outcome of this project because we have also experienced huge blooms, if you want to call them, of widgeon grass. And it sounds like from what Thais said, kind of right around the same time frame, starting around 2018-ish. And it's something that we've been thinking about. I do want to chime in and say that we have definitely noticed the harmful algae blooms in Pest House Pond intertwined with the mats of widgeon grass. And it definitely seems to contribute to the persistence of these algae blooms. Thais also mentioned the issues with the widgeon grass dying and decaying and falling and contributing to decreased oxygen. But in addition to that, I think that the decaying widgeon grass, at least in a small situation like Pest House Pond, where we're looking at, is contributing to the algae blooms kind of in a vicious cycle because it's putting nutrients into the sediment, and then that's what's probably fueling future algae blooms. I don't have scientific data to back that up, but it's something we definitely think may be happening. I definitely hear both sides of the arguments here and recognize that this is a complex situation and can definitely see both sides of this, but I'm very interested in testing different ways that we can try to deal with some of these management issues in regards to these pond management projects, because they're very complicated, as Thais said, and having more tools in the toolbox, or at least testing out a tool and finding it out that this is not a tool you want in your toolbox is always good information to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any other public comment? Looks like we don't have any on YouTube. I know we did have letters submitted from the public for this that are in the record. So at this point, if there aren't any other final questions, I know we're waiting for a file number and heritage on this. So Thais, would you like to continue for 2 weeks?
If I may, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, so this will continue then until February 24th. Great. And thank you for all the information you provided tonight. Okay, so that moves us on in the agenda to our request for determination of applicability. We have the Nantucket Conservation Foundation for windswept cranberry bogs, or windswept bogs, excuse me, represented by Karen Beatty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Karen Beatty. I'm the Director of Science and Stewardship with the Nantucket Conservation Foundation. Also on the Zoom call here this evening is Jessica Cohn, who is an ecological restoration specialist with the Mass Division of Ecological Restoration's Cranberry Bog Program, or Mass DER. The Foundation and Mass DER are working together on a plan for a property-wide wetland restoration project at the Foundation's windswept bog on Pulpus Road, which, as many of you know, contains a former organic commercial cranberry farm. We would like to present a request for determination this evening for installing small test plots for a restoration research project within one of the retired agricultural fields in the western portion of the property. So first, I'd like to provide some background information, and then I'd like Jess to jump in and talk a little bit about our partnership with Mass DER and the reasons why we are proposing this particular research project. As you likely know, the foundation retired the entire agricultural cranberry farm at Windswept back in 2018. It encompassed approximately 37 acres of bogs. And since then, we have been working with Mass DER, who are our partners on this project. We've been doing pre-restoration research on the flora and fauna on the property, some ground penetrating radar studies to determine the presence of historic wetland soils, grounded surface water hydrology modeling, and survey engineering work. So we're collecting a lot of data to inform the plans that we are in the process of putting together. And so we're currently in the process of taking all this data, and we'll be putting a detailed wetland restoration plan together for restoring wetland habitat functionality and connectivity within all of the former bogs across the property. And we hope to have these plans together within the next year, and we'll be submitting them to the Concom in the future, as well as other permitting agencies. But to assist us with this effort, this request for determination of applicability proposes a pilot test project, which would involve temporary disturbance within one former agricultural field on the west portion of the property. Although this site is classified as a wetland resource area, it's highly degraded from past agricultural practices. Windswept has been a cranberry bog since the early 1900s. The legacy impacts out there from all of those years of cranberry farming within the bogs include that the bogs are ditched. There are water control structures within the property. And in particular, there's been many, many years of sanding that has resulted in a really dense agricultural sand layer that is laying on top of all the native wetland soils out there. So what we're proposing in this pilot project, we are proposing this pilot project to inform our future large-scale wetland restoration techniques that we're going to be developing over the next year. And as has been demonstrated at other successfully restored sites off island, cranberry bog restoration to a more natural wetland requires breaking up that compacted sand mat and turning it over so that you can expose the wetland soils underneath it. Elsewhere in Massachusetts, this process has been really successful, but it has employed a really time and fuel intensive method using a large excavator to go in and what's called scoop and flip, which takes a lot of time, a lot of fuel, and a lot of, it's very costly. So the purpose of our research project is we want to test some more simple, low cost and less disruptive restoration techniques in really small areas that we hope will uncompact the heavy, dense agricultural fill layer and expose the underlying peat and encourage more natural soil moisture and density and facilitate wetland species recruitment. So we'd like to test these alternative types of mechanical treatment within 6 test plots, each of which are approximately 50 by 50 feet square, and the size of the test plots have been sized to be as small as possible, but also to allow for the equipment we're going to be using to effectively do the work. We're proposing treatments of mowing all 6 test plots, and then within 2 of them, we propose to plow. 2 of them we propose to disc harrow, and 2 of them we propose to do the harrowing and plowing combined. And then there'll be 2 untreated control plots where we'll be able to compare the results of the treatments to something where we aren't doing anything. We're hoping that these small test plots will allow us to measure and observe the changes over the coming year. And then we'll be able to take the results of that and incorporate it into the larger wetland restoration project that we're in the process of developing. So now I would just like to turn it over to Jess Cohn to talk briefly about why we want to experiment with these techniques and a little bit about our partnership and how it will contribute to the overall development of some larger scale wetland restoration options for cranberry bogs.
Thank you, Karen. Go ahead, Jess.
Thank you, Karen. Hopefully everyone can hear and see me. As Karen said, my name is Jessica Cohn. I'm an ecologist. I work in the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration. If you've not heard or worked with us before, our mission is to restore and protect the health and integrity of the Commonwealth's rivers, wetlands, and watersheds. for the benefit of people, fish, and wildlife. We're an action-oriented and partnership-based division that specializes in ecological restoration. And within the division itself, we have a program dedicated to restoring healthy wetlands on retired or abandoned cranberry bogs. This program has, or the demand for restoration on retired and abandoned cranberry bog lands is something that has increased in the past decade. To date, we have approximately 21 priority cranberry bog restoration projects that we're working on. Windswept bogs is one of our priority projects that we're working on in partnership with the Nantucket Conservation Foundation. And through a decade of assessment, monitoring, and restoration work in our program, we have found that if you do nothing to abandoned or retired bogs, they tend to go on a trajectory towards upland ecosystems, which is certainly not what we would like to see, especially as many of these cranberry bogs were historically created in former wetland ecosystems. And I will actually, Karen, you went over a lot of the primary stressors and the typical actions that we take during these restoration projects. So I'll kind of zoom just talking right to this particular pilot. Our office in Mass DER is supportive of this pilot project. The reason why we want to perform this pilot project is to test simpler, less aggressive, and lower cost methods to restore natural wetland soil properties within former cranberry bog habitats. Specifically, a lot of the retired bogs and the bogs at the windswept location are plagued with uncompacted, heavy, dense fill layers that is a result of nearly 100 years of sand placement on top of the former wetland, which is a common practice that occurs during commercial cranberry bog farming. In the past, on several of our other cranberry bog restoration projects, as Karen has mentioned, we've used large construction equipment, such as excavators, to scoop and flip the material at the bogs to rejuvenate the soil, to uncompact the fill layer and dig down and get to the peat, which is often there is a peat layer underneath about 1 to 2 feet of sand fill, and the peat layer is the signature of that former wetland prior to farming. And so a key action in our projects is uncompacting that layer and getting down to that peat. What we would like to pilot at Windswept is using methods such as mowing and plowing to see if those methods, which are less aggressive than the scoop and flip, could also accomplish the uncompacting the soil and amending the soil to prepare it for the restoration to take place, to prepare it to better hold and maintain the hydrologic conditions that we need during a wetland restoration, as well as to rejuvenate the native wetland plant community. And at the end of the day, really what we're intending to do is to temporarily disturb anthropogenic sand fill that was placed on top of the wetland during years of commercial farming, and to test out which method would really be the best surface roughening treatment that could potentially be less aggressive on the landscape, less time consuming, and potentially lower cost. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Karen and Jess. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when you talk about the cranberry bogs being productive for over 100 years, and until the Conservation Foundation bought it in the mid-60s, it was probably about 50 contiguous small bogs with the most incredible wildlife habitat, because there was lanes going, it was crisscrossed by lanes. And so then when Ocean Spray came in, they just made this, industrial wasteland, basically, that it is today. And I'm curious about two things: whether or not the ground penetrating radar showed the old fields, of which, as I said, there must have been at least 50, whether or not you had any intention ultimately of restoring some of those lanes. I mean, there were just, it was like a maze of hedgerows and lanes. I cannot describe it, how glorious it was and how appalling it is now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I love it out there, Ian, even with the old bogs, but I didn't see it in the past. Do either of you have any perspective on that to answer Ian's question?
I could take a stab at it. I have looked at the ground penetrating radar, and I think that the primary purpose of that, and I'll defer to Jess on this, is to look for peat and look for evidence of where there were wetlands before the cranberry bogs were actually constructed. I haven't seen any evidence of what you're talking about, but I don't think that the ground penetrating radar is designed to pick up something like that. In regards to what we hope to create out there, which obviously we're going to be coming back to you with much more detailed plans. So it's kind of a little beyond the scope of what we're proposing tonight. But what we want to do is restore the connectivity between all the individual bogs so that the water can move freely and is no longer going from bog to bog through man-made structures, and also kind of make the gradient more natural between the surrounding uplands and the wetlands, and then encourage the water to move through the bog slowly in a way that will help to filter some of the water quality issues that we all have in that area of the island, because it does eventually connect to Pulpus Harbor. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I haven't seen, I'd love to see some pictures of that if you have any.
I'll see if, I'm not sure I do, but there must be aerial photographs. So I'll see if I can dig some of them up. And of course, Gibbs Pond, I think it did have the highest levels of phosphorus and nitrogen on the island for the obvious reason. So I'm sure that's going to be an ongoing problem. But no, I'm all for you. I'm so pleased that you're taking this in hand. Thank you.
And in regards to Gibbs, which is actually associated with Milestone, not windswept, we're currently working on a submission to come to the Concom, hopefully to help address some of the harmful algae bloom problems that we're having there. So you'll be hearing more about that soon.
Thank you, Karen. Linda, I see your hand up.
I don't have too much to say on this. I'm glad you're dealing with it and taking it in hand. I'm just sad from a historical point of view. Like Ian, I grew up with those bogs. I grew up with those bogs being worked. And I'm just sad between you and the land bank to see these bogs go fallow, because they were so much a part of Nantucket's history. Granted, the way they kept them alive was not necessarily great for the environment, but I'm very upset with both entities for getting rid of the cranberry bogs and letting them go fallow, especially the land bank bogs. I've had a problem with this all along. I understand that there's groundwater issues and all kinds of things from the way they used to cultivate them and the water flow. But I got to put it on the record. I am very distressed that these bogs are being removed, because that was part of Nantucket's heritage. That's all I got to say about it. But I'm glad you're taking it in hand.
Thank you, Linda.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. For the Conservation Foundation, the decision was economic. We could not afford to be cultivating cranberries at both Windswept and Milestone. And as a private nonprofit, it was an economic decision. And I do want to emphasize that we are continuing to cultivate cranberries organically at Windswept, at Milestone Bog. So we have not completely given up on cranberry growing. And the reason we are trying to perpetuate that is because we do recognize the historic significance to the island. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you, Karen. I can add just a brief bit of context too. It's a very bittersweet topic, something that we deal with in our office all the time. And I would say even a driver of the creation of our program at the state was driven through economics, driven a lot through out-of-state competition in the cranberry industry that has pushed a lot of farmers in the state of Massachusetts to choose retirement and need various exit strategies, wetland restoration being one of them. Some retired bogs end up becoming developments or solar farms. Of course, my bias is to see them all turn back into healthy wetlands, but ultimately it was an economic driver that created the program.
I know up in the upper peninsulas up there in Wisconsin, Minnesota and Michigan, sort of took over the predominant supplier of cranberries for ocean spray, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't really have the economic driver here. But like preserving a house on Main Street that was an historic 1700 house, because I work on a lot of these projects, and then losing what really kept them alive and, something they were taught to do by, indigenous people and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there was a whole host of history involved with the original cranberry bogs. And I have seen the ones coming onto the Cape over in Wareham disappear. They're still there, but they're just sitting there. So I just had to put that on the record from an historical point of view, that these are really, it's an important part of Nantucket's heritage.
Thank you.
I know I totally recognize the historical perspective, but just knowing the unique wetland plant species and animal species that live out there, I'm excited to have them get a go to reestablish in this location, because there are quite a few rare species out there that would be nice if they were a little less rare on the island. Ian, I saw your hand up.
Yes, it was the milestone bogs that were the mosaic of small fields. And when Marlin Roundsville owned the windswept, I mean, it's very much the way it was then that it is now. So I didn't want to give the wrong impression. So
no, they're not as cultivated as the milestone bogs, but they had their own charm and they had their own, it just was, I guess, is all I can say.
Any other questions or comments? Looks like no at this point. So Jeff, I know you made a recommendation that we could issue out a -2 allowing for the work.
Yes.
So if there are no other questions or comments, would somebody like to make a motion to issue a -2 allowing for the work? Mark, you making that motion?
I'll second.
Seth had his hand up there first, Linda, so I'm going to give him the second. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Karen and Jess.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
We look forward to keeping you in the loop. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So that moves us on to minor modifications. We have the land bank at 63 Matticat Road, and I believe they have requested a withdrawal. So we just need to
That
make.
is correct.
Yeah, so we just need to make a motion to accept the withdrawal. Motion made by Linda, seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to certificates of compliance. We have Salvatore at 13 Old Westmore Farm Road.
making a mess here. So 13 Old Westmore Farm Road. Sorry about that. To get it out a while ago. This was for some work on the structure and some additional site work, but it was constructed in compliance, and we're recommending the issuance of the certificate of compliance.
So if there are no questions for Jeff, would somebody like to make a motion to issue the certificate of compliance? Motion by Seth got you with his hand, Linda, but I'll give you the second.
Okay.
By roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrison, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to orders of conditions. So Jeff sent this one out earlier. We only have Tsunami Realty Trust at 283 Hammock Pond Road.
Yes, this was the Brian Madden, I can't even talk, Brian Madden project from earlier, the house relocation.
Yeah.
Farther away from the coastal bank out there. So I only had our fill condition that's in there. And I apologize for missing this earlier. Brian may have brought up the natural heritage was concerned over the revegetation of the driveway. And I know he and I had talked that they were going to obviously be trying to use the material from the site on the site again to encourage the native seed bank. So I'm sure he touched upon that, but we'll attach that determination letter to the order as it is anyways.
Thank you, Jeff. Brian did mention using the fill on site to try and restore that old driveway. Are there any questions or amendments from commissioners? And if not, is there a motion to issue as drafted? Linda made the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrison, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips, Williams.
Aye.
That carries unanimously, and I have to apologize. The dog is like having a party with her toys behind me, making a lot of noise. So again, that carries unanimously. And that is our only order tonight. We have no extensions of orders, so this moves us on to other business approval of minutes from January 27th. Thank you, as always, Terry, for the minutes. Did anybody see anything they need to amend? And if not, would somebody like to make a motion to accept or approve the minutes?
So moved.
Motion made by Linda. Is there a second? Seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. I didn't see any monitoring reports in our packet. So this moves us on to our project operation discussion with Pocomo neighbors. I know we, have lots of letters in our packet, and we obviously had a long discussion at our last meeting about really predominantly the access area and potential impacts to the resource areas there. So I don't know if we've had any additions. Jeff, do you want to kind of start us off?
Sure, yeah, so we discussed this at pretty good length last time, and I know the commission made a field visit now 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago? Yes, 4 weeks ago. Yeah, no, 2 weeks ago. Sorry about that. But it was pre-storm. I know there were some questions, and just to kind of run over the submissions to make sure everyone saw them, I know Arcus Barrows submitted the planting plan and planting scheme for the way. that they had put forward that they're looking to do this year for the commission to review. And then I know today, Sarah Alger submitted some photographs of construction and maintenance for some of those that are there. I know Commissioner Phillips asked for some clarification on when those photos were taken and that. So I think hopefully everyone had a chance to review those materials. I think if you guys have questions about those or want to raise any concerns first, and then if you wanted, you could probably turn it over to either of those groups to provide any further input, and then we can decide where we need to go from there.
Thank you, Jeff. Does anybody have any questions? Just to begin with, Maureen?
Yes, as I mentioned to Jeff that having dates or on the different photos would have been very helpful. I mean, some are obviously at the beginning and some are now, but I don't know if we knew when those photos were taken, that would be a little easier to see the progression. So if that's possible to do, or it's easy to do, that I would appreciate that.
Thank you, Maureen. I have to agree. When I looked at the photos, some I feel like we already dealt with a previous discussion in this area. So dates are definitely helpful. Any other questions, Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding the planting plan that's proposed, I see where the shrubs are proposed to be put, but I have two questions regarding the overall Proprietors Road layout. The first question is anything going to be done to improve the ground cover in terms of, trying to protect the grass that's there, or maybe put new grass in? And then the second is the existing straw wattles that are there. Are those proposed to stay, or is there any type of alternative water drainage being proposed? I think if you have these shrub areas that now are able to, take on infiltration of water, there may be a way to direct water to that area rather than off the bank.
Thank you, Seth. Any other kind of questions before we get going from commissioners? And I guess, just want to remind everybody that we are focused on our resource areas. So I realize that some areas of the Proprietors Way is out of, our jurisdiction, and to really focus us on impacts, that are within our jurisdiction. And at this point, I'm not sure if either Sarah, you'd like to speak to your submission, or Art to yours. Which one of you would like to speak first?
I'll defer.
Okay. Sarah?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to apologize for not having dates on those photographs. I agree with you that it would be helpful to have them, and my clients are working to doing that. Some of the photographs were actually taken by Jeff Carlson and were included in the report that he did in the fall, documenting some of the damage that's happened there. Some of them were taken by Dr. St. Pierre and other neighbors who may be able to date them. One of them was taken, and it's the one that is kind of from a distance, where if you zoom in, you can see that all the structures are now exposed. That picture was taken in the last 2 weeks, after the last big storm. So at the moment, everything's uncovered. I don't know what their plan is in terms of when they intend to do their next delivery of sand. Just some of the things that I wanted to highlight, those wattles, as far as I know, weren't permitted, and to the extent that they're within jurisdiction, while they may be working, they weren't anything the commission permitted. And in some cases, they're diverting water to abutting properties and doing damage to them, which is not something that is supposed to happen. It's also making passage as you get closer to where the sand delivery chute is down on the beach difficult. there have been a number of violations of the order of conditions and the maintenance, and it's very frustrating to hear, as we did at the last meeting, well, you know, the order of conditions has been closed out by a certificate of compliance and they're allowed to do maintenance. It feels as if there's no check on what's being down there. We've had admitted delivery of sand at least on one occasion to another project around the point. I don't know how we ensure that that isn't done. We've had equipment working below mean high water, which obviously isn't permitted. The sand delivery, particularly the excessive sand delivery, as you saw in the pictures, it harms not only the stairs, but it's harming the bluff. There's no vegetation up at the top. There was something in the order of conditions that led me to believe that the idea was that the vegetation in the proprietor's way would continue and wouldn't be destroyed, but that's completely gone. Now they plan to do this planting plan, but how do we know that that's even going to be successful? How does it get water? How does it secure itself? There's just a lot of things that are happening as part of this, supposed ongoing maintenance that we have no control over, that's creating damage. And it just feels as if the commission ought to be able to do something to address that. I'm sure my clients have other things that they'd like to say, so I will defer to them on that.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, Michael Shapiro.
Yeah, so this is Jeff Shapiro also. So our family owns the property at 57 Pocomo Road. And I just really wanted to thank the Conservation Commission, first off, for rolling up their sleeves and looking at this issue. It began when Jeff Carlson came out, looked at the property, and then, of course, completed the enforcement action. When he was out there, he pointed out to us specifically erosion to our bluff that was adjacent to the sand chute. In addition, I think almost more importantly, nature is doing its own best to preserve the rest of our bluff. And my brother Mike is going to show a PDF of some of those pictures that shows grass naturally replenishing itself. And in front of the sand chute, there's so much trauma going on there from the monstrous amount of sand being delivered that nature can't even do its proper work on our own property. And again, our family was involved with the original application for this permit. As we got more information, we went through the Conservation Commission. My parents decided it was something that was not right for our property, and we were going to let nature take its path. Since that time, we've been highly cooperative with all of the neighbors who are participating. Specifically, landscaping was put in the proprietor's road before. Our family extended our irrigation system to help that vegetation propagate, and it did not work. And most importantly, on top of all of that, none of that addresses the trauma to the bluff, okay, and the trauma to the beach that this monstrous delivery of sand is doing. I think the word of overburdening is probably the best word that I've heard. And in addition to all of that, we're forced to police this on our own. Ashley had mentioned that she had seen sand delivered to the other side of the point. The neighbors have to go out there with cameras to make sure this is happening. We're not even noticed when this is happening next to our property. But again, the landscaping is not going to satisfy or solve the problem that's going on, which is the trauma to our bluff and the trauma to our beach. And my brother Mike has a short presentation he'd like to run you guys through right now, if that's okay.
Yes, I can allow a short presentation.
Okay, thank you. He's going to share his screen with you. Okay, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Excuse me. I do want to thank the commission as well for the opportunity to hear us out, to hear our concerns. We have no objections to our neighbors trying to protect their properties, just not at the expense of damaging ours. Okay. We don't want to be the victims of this collateral damage that's occurring in their efforts to shore up their own bluffs.
Madam Chair, through you, are these the pictures that we got today? Because I looked at all this. And these are the ones that didn't have a date on them?
I'm not sure. I don't think we have time for that whole packet, but I would like to give the Shapiros a chance to show, their main points here. Is this the same packet we were given today?
Yeah, I read this.
Some of the photos, I think about 7 or 8 of them were actually in Mr. Carlson's report, which I just extracted and added some annotations to point out some of our concerns with some of the things that you see in the pictures. One picture, as was already mentioned, was from 5 days ago. I can give you the dates of some of the others as well as we go through. We're still trying to get all of the dates. But my point in showing various images over the period of time that this project has been going on is that this is a recurring problem. So it can be buffed up for a while, but then there's a big storm has just happened and we're back to square one again. And so I wanted to show some of the impact that we've observed over the past several years.
We promise we'll do it quickly.
I'll run through it quickly. I know you have a lot of things on your schedule here, so.
Well, just call out the ones that were from 5 days ago. Those are the ones I really want to see.
Okay. Well, that was the one at the end showing the total loss of the sand cover.
Yeah, so I think hit the high notes because we definitely did have a chance to look at some of this stuff.
Sure. I guess our biggest concern is that the project is having an adverse impact to our property and the surrounding area, and we can show that. This is what the proprietor's pathway used to look like. These are the excavators prior to 2016. They weighed about 60 pounds probably with their shovels. It was a single path track with mature vegetation resistant to erosion. And then this was the clearing of the path to make way for sand delivery at the onset of the project. The work protocols say that it should be compact equipment and that the existing vegetation should be protected. This is the compact equipment that's sitting right on the edge of the bluff.
As my brother pointed out to me, that's 40,000 pounds worth of equipment right on the bluff.
Yeah. And every time there's a storm like we just had 5 days ago, this equipment's going to be rolling down the road to deliver another sand pile. This is a picture that was just taken recently by Mr. Carlson. And I point this out to show that as compared to the original path, where it was a single track path, you can see the two-wheel double track path made by the wheeled excavators as they go down. Now, sure, over time, some grass grows in, but just until the next storm, and then damage is repeated. You can see that these wattles are totally ineffective. It looks like they've been driven over by the excavating equipment here. And as I realized that the commission doesn't have jurisdiction over the entire path. It's just they do have jurisdiction in the buffer zone, and the damage is complete all the way through right up to the bluff. And the result of that is water erosion, basically like a Niagara Falls going over the bluff here, which is causing runoff erosion not only to the sand chute, for which no vegetation can grow, but also behind this you can see our bluff, and you can see the effect of the added runoff erosion. And you can see the lack of grass. This is one of Mr. Carlson's photos as well. You can see the lack of grass at the bottom of our bluff adjacent to the sand dump, as opposed to down the beach. And that's because although these walls are pretty ineffective in stopping water from going over the hill, they do divert some to the right and to the left. And to the right is our property and our bluff. And so that excess water is going off of our bank. There's more images of erosion and the water damage it's causing. This is the Grand Canyon of Pacamo. You can see here, again, runoff erosion underneath our bank, actually undermining our bank on that side. This is another picture that Mr. Carlson took just the other day, again, showing runoff erosion and damage to the plant life at the base. Again, from the other angle, at a distance from the bank, the natural grass is growing in very well, absolutely no grass. And I believe it's not just from the water erosion, but because of the geometry of the way the stairs are and the sand pile, the heavy equipment has to come in from that angle to scoop sand out of the pile and move it because the stairs are blocking it from this direction. In addition, we've observed heavy equipment actually right on the peak of the bluff. This is a 10,000 pound, I think it's called a tracked loader is the name of this device. That's 10,000 pounds crossing over the edge of the bluff. And this gets back to what I was saying before about the fact that because of the geometry of the sand pile, they can't come from the west to get to the sand. They have to come from our side and dig the sand out. And all that construction activity right at the base of our bluff damages our bluff and the grass behind it. So lots more erosion pictures. As you can see, there's a huge pile of sand that gets delivered. And we were told at a past meeting that there was just a little bit of extra sand that was taken to some other sites off-site, outside of the project. I think this looks like a lot of sand to me. We were also told that damage to the steps was caused by ice flows. We saw a picture of ice on Nantucket Harbor. Well, this is what a Nantucket iceberg looks like.
So, Mr. Shapiro, do you think you could flip to the pictures that are recent so we could get to those?
Sure. This one. This is a picture that shows travel below the high water line and actually into the water itself. Another picture. This is a picture showing a tracked vehicles going from our side of the point around to the other side of the point. So our proposal is that we would like to see the commission to try to solve the problem by finding an alternate point for sand delivery. One point we might propose is another proprietor's road down the road a little bit. At that point, there are participants in the project on both sides. And this is the area that we would propose. This is the new path. This in red is the old path. The black is the location of the current Pocomo Neighbors projects that are installed. And magenta is a different project that is installed. And then this is a proposed project that is currently being considered. And so my point would be that this would be more centrally located to all of this. And so this is a picture from 5 days ago. I believe this was February 5th, and was taken by our caretaker from across the way. And it was after the recent storm. You zoom in, you can easily see that all of the logs are completely uncovered here. If you actually, I don't know if I can zoom in on here to show you. You can see here, it was my understanding that the logs were actually supposed to come all the way across the sand chute. I may not be correct, but that was my understanding, but they clearly do not. You can see massive erosion of the sand chute here, the logs ending here, and then completely uncovered logs all the way down the beach. So.
One thing that I wanted to add just quickly was that, from what we understand, the Conservation Commission is not in favor of hard solutions in terms of preventing beach erosion and bluff erosion. What's interesting is we have to live in Pocomo now with a hard solution until the sand is replenished. So between now and whenever sand comes, there's a hard solution right on the beach right in front of us, which never seemed like it was the intent of the Conservation Commission from my knowledge of the situation. But thank you so much for hearing us out. We won't speak at this length again, but we sort of felt it was important to let you know our viewpoint on this.
Thank you. We appreciate you sending in the photos and organizing your information for us. One clarification, I know it does seem like those uncovered rolls are a hard structure, but since they are core, they're more forgiving than a true hard structure, although it's not easily giving sand. So I do want to make sure to point that out. And I think we are going to work hard as a commission to figure out a way to mitigate what is happening to your property, which is immediately adjacent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Art, would you like to speak at this point, or someone from your group?
I'd be happy to, but would you rather, it's up to you to let all the opposition folks go first?
We can do that if anybody else would like to speak who's on the call. Steve St. Pierre?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. A lot of those photographs are my photographs, so I can probably get you dates on those. Sorry I didn't do that. I was kind of pressed for time to get them in the first place. This problem has been ongoing since its inception. It's creating hard feelings. I think the neighbors do get along really quite well. And I think that Bartles and his crew, which are the ones that are on the other side of this, have tried to be accommodating, but I think our patience is getting thin. I think there's hard feelings that are developing in the neighborhood from it. I think the people that are involved with this and being affected adversely seem to be getting the same way as I feel, that there's other alternatives that aren't going to be coming up every spring and summer when people come back to see and then discuss and have hard feelings develop over. As far as the sand that goes down to the bluff, none of those pictures show the dump trucks full of sand that go down and dump them off. These are at least 10-wheel dump trucks. They're huge. The Bartles and his group are trying to advocate for 3 rows staggered that kind of go out into the path. I don't see how those vehicles are going to be able to meander their way down to the path bluff and then dump that sand there. And then on top of that, have somebody go down with a payloader or whatever they're going to do, a bobcat, and distribute it over the bluff without every year having recurrent damage being done. They also did propose a dry well at the right at the near the end of the path where the bluff is. To me, that seems like it would just be diverting the water underground that would weaken that bluff even more. But I'm not a hydrologist or geologist, so I can't be sure about that. But that was one of the things they were recommending. The other thing, and one of the reasons why I think it would be better to relocate it adjacent to people who are actually involved in this project, because in the one site that was recommended is the slope, the topography is almost flat, it seems, from the road to the bluff. So as far as water runoff in that location, I think it would be certainly a lot less than where it is now. I mean, there's quite a grade that goes from Pacamo Road down to the bluff where it is now. And the water is just a constant thing of running over and causing erosion. And on top of that, I didn't submit the picture, but I think I do have pictures of, what they throw down to help mitigate their destruction. This pelletized fertilizer grass combination, I think it is. It looks like rabbit food. And this stuff was just sprinkled all over the path, and within a short period of time, after a few storms, it was gone. And it's got to be all in the harbor. And here, everybody on the island's trying to mitigate the eutrophication and all the contamination in the harbor. And this is just, I don't think it's being, they're following best practices that are recommended by Nantucket to try to mitigate all this nitrogen, phosphorus goes in the water. So, those things have to be addressed. A lot of this, I think, could be prevented, and you'd never hear from us again if you just change it, made the location next to Bartles, let them deal with the problem, because they're the ones that are following. They're the ones that's benefiting, and it's just creating a headache for everybody else up the street. So thank you very much for allowing me to express my feelings. I think that's all I have to add.
Thank you, Dr. St. Pierre. I think that's everybody we have from your side. So Art, we'll move it over to your group.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would say that I have to disagree with, some of the assertions that have been made in terms of, I don't know really where to start. Having just received that PowerPoint and the amount of time, whether you want to really go through each and every one, but certainly a lot of those pictures are quite dated. We were aware, the picture that he called the, Pocomo Canyon and those other kind of comments that are being made. We were aware of that sort of runoff that was happening when it happened a couple of years ago, and installed the wattles and included information that we did that activity in our monitoring reports and in discussions with the commission. It wasn't anything that was done, in secret, or anything that we saw as significant permit or project type modification. I don't believe that the wattles are directing any water over the top of the over the bank. I think that there has to be a recognition that there is natural erosion that occurs of coastal banks from wind and rain, and there are natural gullying that occurs. And I think that's really a lot of what you're seeing here. I don't believe that there's adverse impact or effect that is happening to the adjacent property. I believe the property is continuing to naturally erode as it was. In terms of some of the machinery, and again, a lot of the pictures were from construction. The one very large pile of sand was unfortunate. It was explained at the last meeting how that occurred at the start of COVID. In terms of the Boeing stairs, I feel like they're, trying to play a gotcha with me. Instead of just showing me the picture that they had of the sand, I have all pictures of a bunch of the stairs out there destroyed by ice, which I shared with them and said, maybe this is how it happened. So there's a lot of, as you're seeing here, this especially folks on the other, on the south side of the road, who don't like the path not being the way that it was. But what we're here to talk about are the protected environmental interests, and the project is being maintained in compliance. And I would assert that there was no damage as a result of the storm last week, fairly significant storm. There was a contribution of the sand, as was supposed to occur, to the to the system. And I was out there the day after the storm and have photos, and immediately in touch with the contractor, and we're working for the mobilization to replenish the sand cover exactly as the project was permitted to occur. I did not observe any damage to the fiber roll array as a result of the storm. We're checking on this. I think this is, a project that, while, some people may not like it, it's a project that shows and demonstrates how, you can have, a level of coastal resilience and establish vegetation on a bank. All of the bank above these fiber rolls that's installed is heavily vegetated, and and is performing as intended. And again, the activities to replenish the sand is occurring, in accordance with the permit. And I think that most of the photos that are being shown are not of current activities. To say the wattles are in poor condition, yet they've been run over, but we were all there together. And you could see the water wasn't going right over those, that they were being effective. You could see that the damming was occurring and that there was an erosion of even that unconsolidated sand that had been placed. And I don't think it's fair that if there's a really heavy rain and there's a small gully that would happen in any, not the so-called canyon, just exactly what you observed, that there's some movement of this placed sand, that's somehow not a matter that's not compliant with the issued permit. And I think further to that point, you all saw were on the field visit saw the tremendous amount of erosion from the same storms at the end of Pocomo Point, where there really was washout that was going down and over through the vehicle access there. So again, the neighbors have tried to be, the applicants have wanted to continue to be good neighbors. We do think that this planting plan, will significantly help and hopefully soften, even out of your jurisdiction, the path and the activity, but there is amount of sand that we need to get. We, had previously acknowledged at the last meeting, I don't want to be repetitive about the sand that did happen, that went around the point on that one, that shouldn't have happened, that it won't happen again. I was not aware of that. And, we will continue to, monitor and report on the project and only maintain the properties that we're supposed to be maintaining from this point. With respect to high water, this is a wide beach at low water, as you all know. And so mean high water is established by elevation. It is a mean. Sometimes there are tides that come above that elevation. And, just because you have water that goes over a tire marker comes higher up on the beach does not mean that, there was operation below the regulatory mean high water line. So I would agree and concur with the chair with respect to this is not a hard solution. Mass DEP has repeatedly ruled that this is not hard armoring, and I don't believe it's having the kind of effect that a hard armoring solution would. And in terms of sand being available, we've provided the annual sand that would have been provided from the bank anyway, and we're going further with maintaining the cover. So if there are short periods of time that there's not sand that's there in the interim, it doesn't mean that there's an adverse impact or effect as a result of that. Back to Commissioner Engelborg's, he had some questions about the whether the wattles were to remain. And again, almost all of them are out of the jurisdiction. I think it's just the last couple, but yes, I think that they're effective in controlling the stormwater so that the so-called canyon doesn't occur. And then Mr. Seth Wilkinson is on, and he could speak to the mix that a native seed mix. He told me of red fescue, a little blue stem, and bent grass. But again, he's also on. And if you have additional questions with respect to that, then I'm happy to answer any of the questions that you may have.
Thank you, Art. I know Seth Wilkinson has had his hand raised, so I don't know if you want me to give it over to him and
yes,
then
please.
Together. So Seth Wilkinson, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Art responded to most of the points that I had. I too was concerned with the number of misrepresentations that were made during the meeting. Those were mostly opinions, in my opinion. The actual permit for this project notes that it is not a coastal engineering structure, aka it is not a hard structure. That was a finding found by this commission. With regard to the seed mixture, it's a typical native seed mixture. I believe it's specified on the plans. Some of the dominant species were mentioned by Art. There was an incorrect assertion about the biodegradable mulch that is placed. That is a cellulose pelletized cellulose. That's all it is. There is absolutely no fertilizer in that product. It breaks down rapidly. It is solely there to help hold the seed in place long enough for it to germinate. It is not contributing to eutrophication of the harbor, which was another incorrect assertion. This project is being conducted in compliance with the permit. This is getting frustrating for Art and I to have to continue to show up and defend a project which is in full compliance because people don't want trucks going by their property. These are non-conservation issues. The pitch of this proprietor's way is highest on the east and lowest on the west. So if any water flows around that water bar, that straw wattle, it's going into the project area. It is not going to the Shapiro property. Water does not go uphill. It goes downhill. And so there is natural erosion occurring on the Shapiro property. I don't discount that at all, but it doesn't have anything to do with this soft project. It's not reflecting energy like a hard structure would, and water is not flowing uphill and sideways to go over and impact that property. There's natural erosion happening. It's happening all up and down landforms. So it's, this is frustrating, especially when non-factual statements are being made. I would hope that in the future, if the commission wants to speak to specific issues that are out of compliance with the permit, I've not heard one yet. As I said at a prior meeting, the way this project was designed and the way this project was permitted through the order of conditions was annual sand nourishment. We've been being told that we have to recover the fibrils every time they get uncovered, and we have been doing that. Unfortunately, that is contributing to the concern in the neighborhood. That is contributing to the seed not getting as established as it could be. There's a very specific condition in the orders which refers to the work protocol. My work protocol from Wilkinson Ecological Design says that this sand will be renourished annually between March and May. And I think if we started interpreting it correctly, that would go a long way to mitigating some of the concerns in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Seth. And I do, I wanted to allow everybody on this call to speak their piece and end the discussion now. I understand that sometimes maybe incorrect statements are made, but we have to recognize that we're dealing with members of the public and neighbors that don't necessarily have the same expertise and are looking for explanations to what they are seeing. And sometimes it takes longer than we would like to maybe get our explanations out so that everybody is clear on the process. I realize that is difficult, but again, I can see, being a neighbor to this, they didn't expect maybe what they are getting, and are looking to speak their piece. And since it is a Concom permit, I do think it's important we let them do that. Their photos were all within jurisdiction. And I think we are trying to focus on the resource areas here. So Arthur, I'll let you speak with your hand up, and then I think it'll be time for the commission to kind of discuss what's in front of us.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very, very briefly, I'm not going to add anything about the specifics of the project. I just have to say that at this point, we find it very frustrating that Art and Seth and I have to come before the commission every couple of weeks in order to justify a project that's already long since been permitted, is in operation, and has a certificate of compliance, and that we are operating in accordance with the ongoing conditions and requirements of that order of conditions. I don't see that there's any reason why. I mean, certainly we're happy to discuss the situation with the commission at any time, but it seems to me that we're rehashing the same and going over the same ground at every meeting on this. And I just find it a little bit tiresome. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. So Ian, you've had your hand up with either a question or a comment.
Well, it's several things. When Seth referred to the fact that that as a commission we ruled that it wasn't hard armoring. In fact, that's slightly disingenuous from my point of view. We in fact wanted to say that it was hard armoring, but we were overruled by CZM. That's my understanding, that CZM had basically, when Wilkinson had gone before CZM, they had judged it not to be hard armoring. And from my point of view, it clearly is behaving like hard armoring. And when we were out there, Seth corrected me when I talked about NSCAR, but the peninsular effect is noticeable. But what is baffling me, and please, you know, I don't understand why you're not considering the alternative sand deliveries, and that way you can all get along together. And then you wouldn't be so frustrated, and you wouldn't be coming in front of us, and we wouldn't be having to deal with it either. So,
exactly.
Then I don't understand why you aren't looking at that approach. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, just a point of order. I was referring directly to the order of the findings and the order of conditions that govern this project, not CZM. This commission found this not to be a coastal engineering structure in their own findings. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, I must.
Okay. I really want to avoid the back and forth though, because I'm worried that between the neighbors and the project proponents, this is getting too argumentative. And what we need to do as a commission is to decide what measures need to be taken place to mitigate some of the damages we are hearing about. Ian, you just mentioned one, which is using the alternate proprietor's road. I think there's a possibility to mitigate down below the bluff, maybe with some beach grass plantings for the Shapiros to try and mitigate what's happening on that corner, but somehow work together to make a plan so that we're not dealing with the neighbors fighting. You know, I think it is especially difficult because the Shapiros, you know, originally had been a member of this project, you know, and that impacted the original design and the proprietor's road that's currently in use. You know, I don't know that moving the proprietor's road will help the resource areas anymore, you know, when we think about the bluff in totality. But I do think there are probably ways we could mitigate, again, some of the impacts they're seeing as far as potential end scour and from where the bucket needs to grab the sand. You know, I think that that's really where we need to focus in here. And again, not try and have a back and forth, but come to a solution. Jeff?
I mean, just to kind of further the discussion of the solution that's involved, I mean, we've talked a lot about potential impacts and impacts that have happened, impacts that have been mitigated, impacts that could happen. I mean, I think a lot of this, and again, some of this is my opinion in viewing it as well. Excuse me. I mean, I think some of it is, you know, incumbent upon, you know, the applicant, the original applicant, the Pocomo Neighbors group that came together to review their delivery plan as a group. And I don't think it would be necessarily inappropriate to take the commission, instead of having this battle go out in the public forum through the commission, to say, you guys have X amount of time to either update your delivery plan and to work collectively together to do that, or to come back to the commission and re-permit an alternate point of access if that's what needs to be done, because the permit is closed and expired. I mean, I put the burden back on the Pocomo Neighbors group. I mean, it's a group that clearly is in disagreement with itself from where it originally was. But instead of having circular discussions here, I would, you know, as the administrator, say, put the burden back to the applicant to review those delivery protocols and come back to the commission in a set amount of time, either to re-permit something new or to affirm that this is the plan that they're going to go forward with, and leave it to them to work it out and not to battle it out here.
Thank you, Jeff. Seth Engelborg?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the recommendation presented by Mr. Carlson makes sense, particularly because in this case, the Shapiro's, although the project was not ultimately constructed on their property, their property number is actually one of the numbers on the permit.
Tens of thousands of people are converging on the Los Angeles area.
So if it's a weird situation that we're in where, the order of conditions is closed, a certificate of compliance has been issued. I personally view this project as operating within how it was permitted, but I think a lot of the issues could probably be ameliorated at a neighborly level, like Jeff is saying, if a new permit for sand delivery was filed that didn't have the two Shapiro properties included in the permit, since they're no longer relevant to the project. That would make them essentially not a stakeholder in this project. Right now, they're saying there's a outsized, impact to their bluff. Well, that's unfortunate, but when the original permitting went through, they signed on to be part of this permit. And because they chose not to construct the structure after, it's not really relevant. I mean, they're on the permit. They bear the benefits and the detriments just like any other permit holder should.
Thank you, Seth. Any other thoughts from commissioners? Looks like no. So Art and Arthur and Seth, do you guys think that you could work together as a group to maybe come up with an alternate delivery area or some sort of mitigation to your current delivery point? Yes, Art. Oh, you're muted.
Madam Chair, I feel like that's exactly what we have been working on the last year plus in terms of the planting plan and the work that, that's a significant expense the other neighbors are taking on to try to, make that path back and more towards, what the neighbors had hoped it would be. And, it's unfortunate it didn't happen last year. We couldn't secure a contractor, but a contractor is secured this year. So again, I would say that, the best course of action is to proceed with, given, that these neighbors would give the applicant neighbors a chance to, improve the path and try to, in terms of how the trucks would navigate it. That's why it's spaced out the way it is. It's a significant expense for what's being proposed in terms of the plantings, all in an effort really to be good neighbors. So I feel like, that's sort of where we're at, and that's been done.
So then I'm curious, Jeff Carlson, as we have been requiring them to recover the tubes or the quar rolls, excuse me, should we be reviewing that and saying this should be annual? I'm just worried we're at a little bit of a standstill, and I do recognize what I feel like are impacts to the neighboring property that I feel like could be dealt with, but I'm just not sure how to best facilitate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, the easiest way to facilitate it is if they feel they want to deal with the permit differently, especially because that permit's closed. I mean, and Seth said it a little bit. I mean, you could certainly, anyone can file for a permit to change maintenance or deal with it. They could submit a maintenance plan to review, and again for the commission to look at. That suggests that. I mean, you can't really amend the existing permit, but I think if they make that clear, and I think if they work with their neighbors for ways that's going to go on, I mean, they could include provisions in sort of a maintenance plan, even if it got filed again, to include what steps would exactly be taken if these were the impacts that were there. But I think that that's something that, I said it earlier, I think a lot of this comes down to that group that originally permitted this coming together again and deciding what works best for that group to maintain the structure, because based upon the monitored reports and we've seen it, the structure that it exists on the ground, I tend to agree with Seth, it seems to be being maintained in compliance. And so if there's changes to how they want to do that, I think that's for that group to come together and decide and to bring it back in front of the commission.
Okay. Seth Engelborg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know we've been talking for a while, but I do have one question related to why the change was made. If the permit had said annual mitigation, why was the change made to be mitigation after every storm? Is that something the commission imposed? Was that like just the informal thing? Was that ever actually entered into an order of conditions or a certificate of compliance? And if not, I don't really see like what authority we're basing that on. We should, have them do the maintenance as outlined and what the legal agreements we have with them are.
Thanks, Seth. That's a good question. I honestly can't remember back that far to remember the exact details. I know generally speaking, we require these structures to be covered, I believe at all times, and we give them like 3 weeks after storms, but I'm not sure that that's actually written into this permit. So that's something we're going to have to double check on. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, and I mean, from a theoretical perspective, I definitely would much rather see them covered. But if that isn't really in this permit, I'm not sure like what our justification for that is.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up, and it would definitely lessen the impacts to that delivery area. Jeff Carlson, do you remember that permit, or do you have it in front of you?
I think to get to that level of detail, I'd have to pull some. I'd have to pull some of the correspondence and things that went together, maybe some of the minutes of the meetings and things that did it, but off the top of my head, I can't remember. Sorry. We issue a lot of permits.
Yeah. Ian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So condition 33 prohibited work and travel seaward of the mean high water line. We've seen photographs presented this evening that show that clearly the work is taking place. And it says specifically in condition 33, no work or travel by machine is allowed seaward of the mean high water line under this order. So surely by definition, they're out of compliance.
So Ian, the issue is the mean high water line does not get updated all that frequently. So it tends to be much lower than where we witness high tides. So I think Art already mentioned that, but is it FEMA that does those lines? Either way, they're not updated all that regularly.
And so you're saying that we can't trust the evidence of our own eyes here?
Well, just because it's below the water line doesn't mean it's below the mean high water line. Because that's a set line. I forget what state agency does it, forgive me, but that's set by somebody else. So high tides can go above that mean high water line or below it, and it's difficult to assess. So just because you see the tracks doesn't mean it's below that, I don't want to say fictitious line in the sand, but it's an average. Jeff?
Just real quickly, it's one of the reasons why on all of these permits now, we have the requirement that mean high water line has to be staked. So when you can view it. So I hate comparing projects to the project on the East Coast. But we've seen that take place where that line gets staked. And, we've been out for observation and frequently see water go obviously well below it and even above it from time to time, because that number is a jurisdictionally set number by elevation, and the tide fluctuates by the day. So sometimes, that if that number is elevation 3, which a lot of spots are by mean high water, if the tide comes up to 3.5, you go past it that day. So it's kind of an unfortunate number, but it's also unfortunate in the sense that you have to use the jurisdictional number because you can't predict what the water flow is going to be day to day and get a kind of an accurate depiction of what that's going to be. It makes an impossible situation. So
Thank you for clarifying.
so that's why we require every one of these permits now requires that line to be staked.
Any other thoughts from commissioners? Looks like no. Art, did I just see your hand?
I don't want to belabor anything, but I just from a surveyor perspective, mean high water is established by elevation. So as the beach moves, the beach comes up and down, as you all know. Well, that regulatory line also moves. In the datum that we're working in, the North American Vertical Datum in 1988, in this area, the mean high water line is essentially established somewhere right around elevation 1.2. And that's based on a 19-year epoch from the tidal gauges at the steamship. And then when you're referring to other people establishing them, that's what establishes that regulatory mean high water elevation. But then per site, because obviously the beach is somewhat ambulatory, the way that gets established and how we stake it is where you find that actual elevation on the ground.
Thank you, Art.
And the water very often runs up higher than that.
So at this point, would any commissioners like to either make a motion asking the Pocomo neighbors proponents to, come back into us with more information or an alternate route? Or are we content, closing this discussion? Mark?
With the permit and situation it is now, which is closed, do we have the authority to ask them or tell them to move the access road?
Jeff?
Jeff shaking his head. I don't think we do.
I don't think you do.
I think the way we have to do it was, and I'm not saying we should do this, but do an enforcement order. And I'm not sure we're going to go down that path.
Jeff?
I would suggest, given the proposal that we've seen for some of the mitigation work that Art has done, I think setting a time limit to come back after all of that work has occurred and to let the group reconstitute, not this group, but the Pocomo Neighbors group reconstitute to some degree and talk about these things internally. And have them come back and, at the end of the summer, have them come back in 7 or 8 months after that stuff's all gone in for a report and say that these are the discussions that we had. And if the thing ends up moving because of that and they need to re-permit somewhere new, they can file a new permit for word to be new. But again, I think the commission trying to do the work for them, I don't think is going to end up being successful for anybody. I think putting it to them to do the work that they're all involved in is the smartest way to go, and to let them decide what works best for their neighborhood and then come back to the commission. And if they agree to disagree and what's being proposed doesn't work, I haven't heard anyone bring up impacts enough tonight that I would be recommending an enforcement action be issued this evening from our discussion. I think putting the work back to the applicant is the smartest way to go.
Thank you, Jeff. So as I guess I would agree with that, that we really don't have enough evidence for a true enforcement, considering that they are working within their permit. But I do want to see these neighborhood issues resolved in some capacity, because there is potential damage to the bluff and the neighboring properties. So if it's not mitigated better with the new planting plan, I think we should, again, have more information and potentially consider moving to a different proprietor's road. because I can't see that this works for your neighborhood either. Continuing to kind of have such opposition to the project. So at this point, I guess we will end the discussion. And I want to thank everybody who's spoken and submitted material. And it is important for neighbors to keep watch of these projects and notify the Natural Resource Department, immediately when you see impacts, so that they can be addressed. All right. So at this point, we will move on in our agenda to enforcement actions, potential enforcement actions. Jeff, do you have anything?
No, I meant to get some stuff ready for tonight, but unfortunately did not. So next time, I promise.
Okay. That brings us to reports. So we have Crack.
So I know we've got a time constraint, so I'll just limit myself to two. Gary Beller brought up for the second time, he was baffled why we allowed swimming pools in flood zones. And I told him that we were hopefully updating our regulations. And Fritz McClure brought up, who's on the planning board, he brought up that in the 27 bedroom hotel that's proposed for 6 to 8 North Beach Street came before the planning board seeking a waiver not to have a drainage plan, which, and he gave this as an indication of just the pressures of development on natural resources and, on the time. And I thought that was pretty telling. That, and I thought to myself, well, at what point are we involved at that level too? But so thank you. I thought you might be interested in hearing that.
Yep. Thank you, Ian. That is concerning that they wouldn't need a drainage plan in that location.
Well, the planning board said yes, they were seeking a waiver.
Okay.
So that was an indication of how they were basically, trying to cut corners.
Yeah. All right, CPC.
No, nothing to report.
All right, NP and EDC.
Yes, we had a meeting to discuss warrant articles and whether we would take positions on particular ones. The thing that really struck me was that the short-term rental proposals, which originally had the support of the select board. The select board is now frozen into inaction because 2 of the members have had to recuse themselves because of their real estate dealings, Melissa and Dawn. And Christy is out on maternity leave, so that leaves only 2 members. They don't have a quorum, and so they cannot act on this. And so that was, I hadn't realized we were at that point, and I think that's it's unfortunate. So the short-term rental regulations are kind of in abeyance at this point in terms of getting a clear view of it from the select board. And I guess that's all. There were other things, but not relevant to us.
Thank you, Maureen. So that moves us on to commissioners' comments. Linda?
Another good meeting, Madam Chairman. Not easy stuff.
Thank you, Linda. Any other comments? I know, Jeff, I just want to mention at the beginning of the meeting, we had public comment inquiring both about the Sconset Bluff and missing quarterly reports. And then we also, and that was from RJ Turcott, we also had Sam Keverstan speak to what's happening out at Sacaja Pond and wondering for an update from the town on progress there. And I said that, we would check back in with you.
Yeah, I connected with Sam offline as well. He emailed me about that because he obviously emailed to get the Zoom link. So we will get all of that compiled and have a written update for everybody for the next meeting on both of those things.
Thank you, Jeff. And if there's no other commissioners' comments, Jeff, we'll move on to administrator staff reports.
Yeah, just one quick thing. For those, we talked about it briefly last time. There's that upcoming coastal resiliency workshop that we have 2 representatives to. I know there was interest for Ashley to go on our behalf for one. She was able to secure those as professional development days by some miracle. So she's eligible. We just need a second designee to represent the commission at that. So
Isn't this a 3-day thing? Isn't this a 3-day thing all day type of thing?
Yeah, it's 2 days,
Yes.
March 7th and 8th, all day.
What days are those?
It's a Monday and a Tuesday.
Oh boy.
Well, if I may, Madam Chair, as the vice chair, I feel that it, would fall on me to go, and I'm happy to.
Yeah, I know you mentioned your interest last meeting. So is everybody happy with Ian and I going as representatives?
Sure.
Makes sense.
Okay. So that will happen in the beginning of March, and we will report back to you.
Have fun.
And that's it. And then I wanted to say, I know we have scheduled executive session tonight with Ben Timon. I just wanted to remind everybody, if we go into executive session, that it's limited to the purpose on the agenda, which is the pending litigation revolving around the removal enforcement order. So I know there are other things in play, but we're really kind of limited to that as well.
Thank you. Seth?
So I'll make a motion to head into executive session for the purpose listed on the agenda with the intention not to return to open session afterward.
Thank you, Seth. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Grossman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Okay, so we're gonna move this meeting over to executive session. I know Jeff usually needs a minute or two to close this meeting and open the next.
So we get out of this meeting and go to the other link that he sent us.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool.